Dr. Kevin Hayes looked out the small window of his quarters aboard the ship New Horizon and watched the stars drift by. He had never been this far from Earth before. The 34-year-old professor from Ohio felt completely out of place among all the military officers and diplomats rushing through the corridors. Kevin was just a language teacher. He studied old dead languages that nobody spoke anymore. But somehow, that made him the most important person on this ship. 3 months ago, Kevin had been grading papers in his small office at the university when everything changed. The news broke on every channel at once. Humans were not alone in the universe. The Zephyrian Empire had made contact, and they wanted to talk. But their language was unlike anything humans had ever heard. It was complex, with sounds that hurt human ears and meanings that seemed to shift like water. The government had tried everything. Computer programs failed. Professional translators gave up after weeks of trying. The alien language seemed impossible to understand. Then someone remembered Kevin's work on ancient Earth languages. He had spent years figuring out how dead civilizations talk to each other. Maybe he could do the same with living aliens. Kevin remembered the day they came to his office. 2 men in black suits who looked like they had never smiled in their lives. They showed him recordings of the alien communications. At first, Kevin thought it was hopeless too. The sounds were strange, almost musical, but harsh at the same time. But then he started to notice patterns. The way certain sounds repeated. The rhythm behind the words. It reminded him of some very old languages he had studied. "I think I can learn this," Kevin had told them. Those 5 words changed his life forever. Now he was on a spaceship heading to meet the aliens face to face. Kevin touched the small recorder in his pocket. He had been studying Zephyrian language files for weeks. The sounds still hurt his ears. But he was starting to understand how they worked. The aliens seemed to value honor above everything else. Their language had dozens of different ways to show respect or insult. One wrong word could mean the difference between peace and war. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Kevin called. Captain Lisa Murphy entered his small room. She was a tough woman in her 40s with gray streaks in her brown hair. Kevin had learned that she had fought in 3 different space conflicts before this mission. She looked tired. "We'll reach the meeting station in 6 hours, she said, sitting down across from Kevin. "Are you ready for this?" Kevin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I don't think anyone could be ready for this. I'm going to try to talk to 8-foot-tall crystal warriors who could probably tear me apart with their bare hands. The reports say they're not violent during diplomatic meetings," Captain Murphy said. But Kevin noticed she didn't sound completely sure. "What exactly do you need me to do?" Kevin asked. He had been told the basics, but nobody had explained the details of his job. Captain Murphy pulled out a small tablet and showed him some documents. "The Zephyrians want to sign a peace treaty. There have been small fights along the border between human and Zephyrian space for 2 years now. Nothing major, just misunderstandings that got out of hand. Both sides wanted to stop." Kevin looked at the papers. They were covered in alien symbols that looked like someone had drawn crystals and lightning bolts. "I need to translate the treaty." "That's part of it. But mostly, we need you to make sure nothing gets lost in translation during the ceremony. The Zephyrians are bringing their own translators, but we want someone who can catch any problems before they happen." Kevin nodded. It sounded simple enough. Just sit in a room and make sure everyone understood each other. "What's the worst that could happen?" Captain Murphy looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. "Let's hope we don't find out." After she left, Kevin went back to studying. He played the alien recordings over and over, taking notes on every sound and pattern. The Zephyrian language was actually beautiful once you got used to it. It reminded him of music, with each word flowing into the next like notes in a song. But it was also dangerous. The slightest change in tone could turn a greeting into a challenge. Kevin had learned that Zephyrians were warriors by nature. Their whole society was built around concepts of honor and strength. They respected courage but despised weakness. The language reflected this. There were hundreds of words for different types of bravery, but almost no words for fear or doubt. As he worked, Kevin began to notice something strange in some of the newer recordings. The Zephyrians had been sending regular communications to set up the meeting. Most of them were formal and proper, exactly what you would expect from diplomatic messages. But in some of the recent files, Kevin heard whispers in the background. Quiet conversations that the official translators had missed. Kevin played these sections over and over, trying to understand what was being said. The words were in an older form of Zephyrian, almost like a dialect. It took him hours to piece together even small parts of the conversations. What he heard made his blood run cold. The whispers talked about soft shells, which seemed to be what some Zephyrians called humans. They mentioned easy prey and harvest time. Most disturbing of all, Kevin heard the phrase, "the trap is set," repeated several times. Kevin sat back in his chair, his hands shaking slightly. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe he was misunderstanding the context. The whispers could mean anything. But his gut told him something was very wrong with this peaceful meeting. He thought about telling Captain Murphy what he had heard. But what if he was mistaken? What if his limited understanding of Zephyrian was causing him to hear threats where none existed? Starting a war because he misunderstood some background chatter would be worse than useless. Kevin decided to wait. He would watch and listen during the meeting. If his fears were correct, he would know soon enough. If he was wrong, then humanity would have peace with the Zephyrian Empire. A few hours later, alarms sounded throughout the ship. Kevin looked out his window and saw lights in the distance. The Zephyrian ships were arriving. Even from far away. They were impressive. The alien vessels looked like they had been carved from giant crystals, with smooth surfaces that reflected the light of nearby stars. They moved through space with a grace that human ships couldn't match. Kevin gathered his notes and recording equipment. He put on his best clothes, which weren't much compared to the fancy uniforms the diplomats wore. But he was representing humanity today, and he wanted to look respectable. As he walked toward the meeting room, Kevin passed windows that showed the growing fleet of Zephyrian ships. There were more of them than the reports had mentioned. Many more. For a peaceful diplomatic meeting, the Zephyrians had brought what looked like an entire battle fleet. Kevin's worst fears were starting to seem more realistic. But he was just a language professor. What could he do against an alien armada? His job was to translate, nothing more. He would do his duty and hope that his suspicions were wrong. The meeting station appeared ahead of them, a neutral facility built specifically for diplomatic contacts between different species. Kevin could see other alien ships docked there as well. Representatives from a dozen different civilizations had come to witness this historic moment between humans and Zephyrians. Kevin took a deep breath and checked his equipment one more time. In a few hours, he would be sitting across from the most dangerous warriors in known space, trying to help two civilizations understand each other. He had come just to translate their words. He had no idea that he was about to change the course of galactic history. The meeting station was bigger than Kevin had imagined. As the New Horizon docked, he could see through the windows that the facility stretched out like a small city in space. Different sections were built to accommodate various alien species, each designed with their own environmental needs and cultural preferences. Kevin followed Captain Murphy and the human diplomatic team through the docking tube. The station's artificial gravity felt different from the ship, lighter somehow. The air smelled strange too, filled with scents he couldn't identify. This was truly neutral territory, designed for beings who had evolved on completely different worlds. "Stay close to the group," Captain Murphy warned as they walked through the main corridor. This station hosts dozens of different species. Some of them breathe different gases or have temperature requirements that could be dangerous to humans. Kevin nodded, clutching his translation equipment tighter. Around them, he could see other beings moving through the corridors. Some walked on two legs like humans, others moved in ways that defied easy description. A few looked almost normal until you noticed details like extra arms or eyes that reflected light in inhuman ways. But it was the Zephyrians who commanded attention wherever they went. The 8-foot-tall warriors moved through the station like they owned it. Their crystalline skin caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. Each one looked like they could break a human in half without effort. Kevin watched them carefully, listening to their conversations as they passed. The human delegation was given quarters in the station's diplomatic wing. Kevin's room was small but comfortable, with a view of the docking bays where more ships continued to arrive. He could see the Zephyrian fleet spread out like deadly flowers against the starfield. There were at least 50 ships out there, maybe more. That's a lot of firepower for a peace treaty, said a voice behind him. Kevin turned to see Commander Amy Rodriguez, the head of the small military honor guard that had accompanied the diplomats. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Kevin had heard she had fought Zephyrians before in the border conflicts. I was thinking the same thing, Kevin admitted. Do you think they're planning something? Commander Rodriguez studied the alien fleet through the window. In my experience, when someone brings that many guns to a peace talk, they're not really planning on keeping the peace. Kevin felt a chill run down his spine. His fears about the whispered conversations were looking more and more justified. What can we do about it? Right now, nothing. We follow orders and hope for the best. But stay alert, Professor. If things go wrong, we might need your language skills for more than just translation. That evening, Kevin attended a briefing with the rest of the human team. Ambassador Paul Wright, a distinguished man in his 60s, explained the schedule. For the next day's ceremony, the Zephyrians would present their terms for peace, the humans would accept them, and both sides would sign the treaty in front of representatives from 12 other species. This is a historic moment, Ambassador, Wright said. The end of hostilities between our species and the beginning of a new era of cooperation. Kevin raised his hand. Sir, I've been studying the Zephyrian communications, and I think there might be some concerns about their actual intentions. The ambassador looked annoyed. Professor Hayes, we have professional diplomatic translators who have been working on this for months. I don't think we need to worry about misunderstandings at this point. But sir, I've been hearing things in their background conversations that don't match what they're saying officially. There are references to humans as soft shells and talk about harvest time and traps. Ambassador Wright waved his hand dismissively. Professor, you're reading too much into casual conversation. Every species has slang terms for others. I'm sure humans have unflattering names for Zephyrians too. Kevin wanted to argue, but he could see that the ambassador had already made up his mind. The diplomatic team had spent months preparing for this moment, and they weren't going to change course based on the concerns of a linguistics professor who had never been involved in interstellar politics before. After the briefing, Kevin returned to his room feeling frustrated and worried. He spent the night going over the Zephyrian recordings again, trying to find more evidence of what he suspected. The more he listened, the more convinced he became that the peace treaty was some kind of trap. The ceremony was scheduled to take place in the station's grand hall the next morning. Kevin arrived early to set up his translation equipment. The hall was enormous, with seating for hundreds of beings. Representatives from various species were already taking their places, their different forms creating a bizarre but magnificent display of galactic diversity. The Zephyrian delegation entered with great ceremony. War Commander Vexal led the group, his crystalline form gleaming under the hall's lights. He was larger than the other Zephyrians, with deeper colors in his crystalline skin that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Behind him came a dozen other warriors, each one looking like they could tear through steel with their bare hands. Kevin took his place in the translator's booth, a small enclosed area with a perfect view of the proceedings. He put on his headphones and checked his equipment one more time. From here, he could hear everything that was said in the hall and translate it for the human delegation if needed. The human diplomats entered next, led by Ambassador Wright. They looked small and fragile compared to the Zephyrians, but they walked with dignity. Commander Rodriguez and her honor guard flanked them, their hands never straying far from their weapons. War Commander Thexal began the ceremony with a speech in the Zephyrian language. Kevin listened carefully as the alien's words boomed through the hall. On the surface, it was a standard diplomatic address about peace and mutual respect. But Kevin caught subtle inflections that suggested something else entirely. The Zephyrian language had layers of meaning that most translators missed. Certain tones and word choices could completely change the meaning of a sentence. As Kevin listened, he realized that War Commander Thexal was actually giving two speeches at once. One was the peaceful message that the official translators were hearing. The other was a victory speech meant for Zephyrian ears only. Kevin's hands began to shake as he understood what was really happening. The peace treaty wasn't about ending the conflict. It was about ending the war through total human surrender. The Zephyrians weren't negotiating. They were dictating terms of defeat. The treaty documents were brought forward, covered in both human and Zephyrian writing. Kevin watched in horror as he realized what the humans were about to sign. In the Zephyrian text, hidden in the formal language of diplomacy, were clauses that would make humanity a subject species of the Zephyrian Empire. Even worse, Kevin caught whispered conversations among the Zephyrian delegation. They were planning to take the human diplomatic team as hostages. Once the treaty was signed, they would use the captured humans as leverage to force Earth's complete surrender. Through his earpiece, Kevin heard Captain Murphy's voice from the New Horizon. "Professor Hayes, can you confirm the treaty terms? We need to know exactly what we're agreeing to before the ambassador signs." Kevin stared at the documents and at the assembled aliens watching the ceremony. The Zephyrians had brought their entire battle fleet. Other species had sent observers to witness what they thought would be a peaceful resolution. The humans had walked into a trap, and Kevin was the only one who knew it. His finger hovered over the transmission button. He could tell Captain Murphy the truth and warn the human fleet. But that would expose their knowledge of the trap and probably start a battle right here in the neutral station. Innocent beings from other species would be caught in the crossfire. Or he could stay quiet and let the ceremony proceed. The humans would sign the treaty, not knowing they were surrendering their entire species to slavery. By the time they realized what had happened, it would be too late. Kevin looked at War Commander Thexal, who was smiling in a way that showed too many sharp teeth. The alien knew exactly what was happening. He was enjoying the moment before. Springing his trap dot in his earpiece, Captain Murphy's voice came again. "Professor Hayes, we need that confirmation. What do the treaty terms say?" Kevin's hand moved to his translation controls. He had a choice to make, and the fate of humanity might depend on what he did next. Kevin's heart pounded so hard he thought everyone in the hall might hear it. Captain Murphy was waiting for his answer through the earpiece. War Commander Thexal was moving toward the signing table. Ambassador Wright had his pen ready. In seconds, humanity would unknowingly sign away their freedom forever. Kevin made his choice. Instead of pressing the button to talk to Captain Murphy, he reached for a different control. Every translator booth had an override system that let them broadcast directly to the entire hall in case of emergencies. Kevin had never used it before, but he knew how it worked. He took a deep breath and began to speak in Zephyrian. But these weren't the words that War Commander Thexal expected to hear. "By the ancient laws of honor that bind all Zephyrian warriors," Kevin said, his voice echoing through the hall in perfect alien pronunciation. I speak for the humans and challenge the honor of War Commander Thexal and his entire bloodline." The reaction was immediate and explosive. War Commander Thexal spun around to stare at the translator booth, his crystalline features shifting from smugness to shock to rage. The other Zephyrians began making sounds that were somewhere between roars and musical notes. The alien observers in the hall started talking excitedly in their own languages. Kevin continued speaking, using phrases he had found in the oldest Zephyrian records. "I invoke the right of Kethmer, the challenge of truth, as written in the first codes of your ancestors. Face us in honest combat, or be known forever as oath-breakers and cowards." The hall erupted into chaos. Kevin could see Ambassador Wright staring at him in horror and confusion. Commander Rodriguez had her hand on her weapon, ready for anything. The representatives from other species were either fleeing their seats or leaning forward to watch what would happen next, but it was War Commander Thexal's reaction that mattered most. The huge alien warrior was trembling with rage, his crystalline skin flashing with angry colors. He shouted something in rapid Zephyrian that Kevin barely caught. "What is the meaning of this insult?" Thexal roared. "What soft shell dares to speak the ancient words?" Kevin stood up in his translator booth so everyone could see him. He was terrified, but he forced his voice to stay steady. "I am Kevin Hayes, speaker for the humans. Your deception has been heard and understood. You came here not for peace, but to trap and enslave. The ancient laws say that honor demands truth. Will you face the challenge, or will you run like a beaten animal?" The insult was perfectly calculated. Kevin had studied Zephyrian culture enough to know exactly which words would cut deepest. Calling a warrior a beaten animal was one of the worst things you could say in their language. Thexal took a step toward the translator booth, his claws extending. For a moment, Kevin thought the alien was going to try to kill him right there. But then other Zephyrians began speaking rapidly to their commander. Kevin caught enough words to understand that they were reminding Thexal of the ancient laws. An elderly Zephyrian with darker crystalline skin stepped forward. Kevin recognized him from the files as Elder Vorthek, one of the most respected war leaders in their empire. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "The challenge has been properly given according to the old ways," Elder Vorthek announced. "The human speaks our ancient tongue better than many of our own young warriors. By the laws that have bound our people since the first crystal grew, War Commander Thexal must accept or forfeit all honor." Thexal looked like he wanted to argue, but Kevin could see that he was trapped by his own culture's rules. The other alien species in the hall were watching intently. Some of them were recording everything. If Thexal refused the challenge now, word would spread across the galaxy that the Zephyrians were oath-breakers. "What are the terms of this challenge?" Thexal asked through gritted teeth. Kevin had been hoping for this question. He had spent months studying Zephyrian law and culture, and he had found something that might give humanity a chance. "3 trials, as written in the codes of Kethmer," Kevin replied. "A trial of cunning, a trial of strength, and a trial of honor. Each side chooses 1 champion for each trial. If the humans win 2 of the 3 trials, your fleet withdraws from human space forever and swears never to return. If you win, then humanity will accept whatever terms you offer." The hall fell silent as everyone processed what Kevin had just proposed. He could see Ambassador Wright trying to signal him to stop, but it was too late now. The challenge had been made according to ancient alien law, and there was no taking it back. Elder Vorthek nodded slowly. "The terms are acceptable according to tradition, but know this, human speaker. These are trials to the death. Your champions will face ours with no mercy given or expected." Kevin felt his knees go weak, but he managed to stay standing. He had just committed humanity to a fight for their survival, and he wasn't sure they could win. But it was better than the alternative. At least now they had a chance. "We accept," Kevin said. War Commander Thexal smiled, showing all his sharp teeth. "Excellent. We will enjoy crushing your pathetic species in honest combat instead of simply taking you as slaves." Commander Rodriguez activated her communicator. "All human personnel, we have a situation. Professor Hayes just challenged the Zephyrians to some kind of formal combat. I need to speak with Captain Murphy immediately." Within minutes, Captain Murphy's voice came through the communication system. She had been listening to everything. "From the New Horizon. Professor Hayes, what exactly have you done?" Kevin explained quickly about the trap he had discovered and the challenge he had issued. He could hear Captain Murphy cursing softly as she understood the full situation. "So, our choices are to fight these trials or become slaves?" she asked. "That's about right," Kevin replied. "But Captain, there's something else. I've been studying their culture, and I found some things that might help us. The trials don't have to be purely physical combat. There are rules and traditions we can use." Elder Vorthik stepped forward again. "The trials will begin at dawn tomorrow. Each side has until then to choose their champions and prepare. The first trial will be cunning, followed by strength, then honor." As the hall began to empty, Kevin realized that several humans were staring at him with expressions ranging from admiration to anger to terror. Ambassador Wright approached the translator booth with a face that promised an unpleasant conversation. "Professor Hayes," the ambassador said coldly, "you have just committed an act of war without authority. Do you realize what you've done?" "I've given us a fighting chance instead of walking into slavery," Kevin replied. "Sir, they were never planning to honor any peace treaty. This was all a trap to capture our delegation and use us as hostages." Commander Rodriguez joined the conversation. "The professor's right, Ambassador. I saw the size of that fleet. They brought enough firepower to level a planet to what was supposed to be a peace ceremony." Ambassador Wright looked around the nearly empty hall, then back at Kevin. "Even if you're right about their intentions, we're still facing an impossible situation. How are we supposed to defeat Zephyrian warriors in combat?" Kevin pulled out his notes and recordings. "I've been studying their culture and laws for months. There are traditions and rules that we can use to our advantage. We just need to choose the right champions and use the right strategies. And what if we lose?" Ambassador Wright asked. Kevin looked through the hall's windows at the Zephyrian battle fleet waiting in space. "Then we die fighting instead of living as slaves, but I don't think we're going to lose." Commander Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "You sound confident for someone who just started a war with 8-foot-tall crystal warriors." Kevin managed a weak smile. "I've spent my whole life studying how different cultures communicate and compete. These trials aren't just about fighting. They're about understanding what the Zephyrians truly value and showing them that humanity deserves respect." As the human delegation prepared to return to their quarters, Kevin realized that his quiet life as a university professor was over forever. Tomorrow he would help decide the fate of his entire species. He had come to this station just to translate words between two civilizations. Now, he was about to discover if those words could save humanity from extinction. Kevin barely slept that night. He spent hours in the human quarters, working with Commander Rodriguez and the rest of the team to prepare for the trials. The weight of what he had done pressed down on him like a mountain. He had committed humanity to a fight for survival, and now they had less than 12 hours to figure out how to win. "Tell me again about these trials," Commander Rodriguez said as she studied Kevin's notes about Zephyrian culture. "The trial of cunning is first," Kevin explained. "It's usually some kind of strategic game or puzzle that tests intelligence and thinking ability. The trial of strength comes next, which is normally physical combat. The trial of honor is last, and that's always single combat between the leaders." Commander Rodriguez nodded grimly. "So we need 3 champions. Any ideas?" Kevin had been thinking. about this all night. For cunning, I think Communications Officer Beth Taylor would be our best choice. She's brilliant with codes and strategy games. For strength, we need someone who can think as well as fight. Maybe Sergeant Danny Clark? Danny's a good choice, Rodriguez agreed. He's trained in multiple fighting styles, and he's smart enough to adapt. What about the Trial of Honor? Kevin's face went pale. According to the rules I found, the person who issued the challenge has to fight in the honor trial. That means me. The room fell silent. Kevin was not a soldier or a fighter. He was a quiet professor who had never been in a real fight in his life. The idea of facing War Commander Thexal in combat seemed like suicide. There has to be another way, Rodriguez said. Maybe we can find a loophole in their rules. Kevin shook his head. I've read everything I could find about Kethmer challenges. The speaker who issues the challenge must defend it personally. It's about taking responsibility for your words. Early the next morning, the trials began. The stations. Cargo Bay had been converted into an arena overnight. Hundreds of beings from different species had gathered to watch. Some had traveled from other systems just to see humans and Zephyrians fight according to ancient laws. The trial of cunning took place on a raised platform in the center of the arena. Beth Taylor walked onto the platform looking calm and confident, but Kevin could see the tension in her shoulders. Her opponent was Sub-Commander Vexith, a smaller Zephyrian with silver crystalline skin and eyes that seemed to calculate everything they saw. Elder Vorthak explained the rules. The trial of cunning will be Tholkith, the game of mirrors. Each player must navigate a strategy web while hiding their true intentions from their opponent. Victory comes to the one who achieves their secret goal first. Kevin watched as they brought out the game board. It looked like a three-dimensional maze made of crystal and light. Players had to move pieces through the maze while trying to figure out what their opponent was really trying to accomplish. It was like chess, poker, and a puzzle all combined into one incredibly complex challenge. Beth studied the board carefully before making her first move. Kevin knew she had a background in cryptography and game theory, but this was unlike anything humans had ever played. Vexith moved quickly and confidently, clearly familiar with the game. For the first hour, it looked like Beth was losing badly. Vexith seemed to anticipate her every move, blocking her pieces and controlling key areas of the board. The Zephyrian spectators made approving sounds as their champion dominated the game. But Kevin noticed something that the aliens missed. Beth wasn't really trying to win the obvious way. She was studying Vexith's playing style, learning how he thought. Every move she made was designed to gather information about her opponent. In the second hour, everything changed. Beth suddenly began playing with a speed and precision that surprised everyone. She had figured out the patterns in Vexith's strategy and was using them against him. Within minutes, she had turned the game completely around. Vexith realized what was happening and tried to change his approach, but it was too late. Beth had mapped out his thinking process and could predict his moves before he made them. When she achieved her secret goal and won the game, the entire arena fell silent in shock. Elder Vorthik stood up slowly. The trial of cunning goes to the humans. Kevin felt a surge of hope. They had won the first trial, but the hardest ones were still ahead. The trial of strength began an hour later. Sergeant Danny Clark entered the arena wearing light armor and carrying weapons chosen according to Zephyrian tradition. His opponent was Kruldash, a massive warrior even by Zephyrian standards. The alien stood nearly 9 feet tall and looked like he could break rocks with his bare hands. "This is going to be ugly," Commander Rodriguez muttered as she watched the two fighters prepare. The trial of strength was simple and brutal. 2 warriors entered a circle marked in the sand. Only one would leave alive. There were no rules except that each fighter could only use traditional Zephyrian weapons. Kruldash carried a crystal spear that gleamed like it was made of diamonds. Danny had chosen a shorter weapon, something like a sword with a curved blade. To Kevin, it looked like David facing Goliath, except Goliath had natural armor and claws that could cut through steel. When the fighting began, Kevin could barely watch. Kroldash attacked with incredible speed for something so large. His spear whistled through the air where Danny's head had been a split second before. The human soldier rolled and dodged, using his smaller size to avoid the devastating attacks, but it couldn't last forever. Kroldash was too strong and too fast. One of his strikes caught Danny's armor and sent him flying across the circle. The human hit the sand hard and didn't get up immediately. The Zephyrian crowd roared their approval as Kroldash moved in for the killing blow. But Danny wasn't finished yet. As the giant alien raised his spear, Danny rolled between his legs and struck at the back of Kroldash Destiny with his curved blade. Kevin had studied the Zephyrian anatomy files, and he had shared what he learned with Danny. The crystalline beings were incredibly strong, but their joints had weak points that could be exploited if you knew where to hit them. Kroldash stumbled and fell to one knee. Danny moved quickly, using a fighting technique that no Zephyrian had ever seen before. He wrapped his arms around the alien's neck and applied pressure to specific points that Kevin had identified in the anatomical charts. It was a submission hold that worked on the Zephyrian nervous system. Within seconds, Kroldash was unconscious. Danny held the position until Elder Vorthak confirmed that his opponent was completely defeated. The trial of strength goes to the humans, Elder Vorthak announced. Kevin felt dizzy with relief and terror. They had won 2 trials, which meant humanity was free. But War Commander Thexael was demanding the trial of honor anyway. According to Zephyrian law, any warrior could demand satisfaction for insults given, even after the main challenge was decided. "I will have the blood of the one who called me a beaten animal," Thexael declared. "The speaker must face me in the circle of honor." Kevin's legs felt like water as he realized what this meant. Even though humanity had technically won, he still had to fight the war commander personally. If he lost, it wouldn't change the outcome of the trials, but he would be dead. Commander Rodriguez grabbed his arm. "You don't have to do this. We won the challenge. You can refuse the personal combat." Kevin looked at the gathered aliens watching from the arena seats. Representatives from dozens of species had witnessed everything that happened here today. If he refused to fight now, it would look like cowardice. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy would be built on this moment. "I have to do it," Kevin said quietly. "If I run now, every species in the galaxy will think humans are cowards who hide behind technicalities." As Kevin walked toward the circle of honor, he tried to remember everything he had learned about Zephyrian combat traditions. There had to be something he could use, some rule or custom that would give him a chance against the 8-foot-tall killing machine waiting for him. War Commander Thexael was already in the circle, his crystalline claws extended and his eyes blazing with fury. He had been humiliated by losing the trials, and he wanted to take his anger out on the human who had caused it all. Kevin stepped into the circle, carrying only a simple metal rod, the most basic weapon allowed by Zephyrian tradition. He looked like a child facing an adult, a scholar about to be torn apart by a professional warrior. But as he faced his opponent, Kevin remembered something he had found in the oldest Zephyrian texts. There was more than one way to win a trial of honor. Combat was just the most common method. Kevin took a deep breath and began to speak in the most ancient form of Zephyrian language he had learned. If he was going to die here, he would at least make it count. Kevin stood in the circle of sand, holding his simple metal rod while War Commander Thexael loomed over him like a crystalline mountain of death. The arena had fallen completely silent. Hundreds of alien beings leaned forward to watch what everyone expected to be a very short and very bloody fight. Thexael's claws gleamed under the harsh lights as he prepared to charge. His crystalline skin shifted through angry colors of red and orange. Kevin could see his own reflection in the alien's polished surface, and he looked terrified. But instead of raising his weapon or trying to run, Kevin did something that shocked everyone in the arena. He began to speak. The words that came out of his mouth were an ancient Zephyrian, a dialect so old that even Elder Vorthek had to strain to understand it. Kevin's voice was clear and strong, cutting through the silence like a blade made of sound. "Hear me, children of the crystal worlds," Kevin said, his pronunciation perfect despite his fear. "I speak the words of Kethal I, who united your scattered tribes under the banner of honor." War Commander Thexal stopped his advance, confusion replacing rage on his alien features. Kevin was reciting something from Zephyrian history. But not just any history. These were the founding words of their entire civilization, spoken in the exact dialect of their greatest ancestor. Kevin continued, never taking his eyes off Thexal. "In the time before memory, when the crystal sang alone in the void, Kethal spoke these words to his enemies. The warrior who knows only the song of blades will die forgotten. The warrior who knows the song of wisdom will live forever in the hearts of his people." A murmur went through the Zephyrian spectators. Kevin was quoting their most sacred texts, and he was doing it perfectly. But more than that, he was using the ancient language to challenge Thexal in a way that had nothing to do with physical combat. "I name you Thexal of the Crimson Ridge clan," Kevin continued, his voice growing stronger. "Son of Vexthal the Bold, grandson of Kethdar the Wise. I know your lineage back 7 generations, and I know the oaths your ancestors swore, Thexal." Expression changed from confusion to something that might have been fear. Kevin was demonstrating knowledge of Zephyrian culture that went deeper than most Zephyrians possessed themselves. In their society, knowing someone's complete family history was a sign of either great respect or preparation for a very specific kind of challenge. Kevin had spent the previous night doing more than just worrying about the combat trial. He had researched everything he could find about War Commander Thexal and his family line. What he discovered gave him an idea for a different kind of victory. "Your great-great-grandfather, Morthal the Truth Seeker, swore an oath before the Council of Elders," Kevin continued. "He promised that his bloodline would never raise weapons against those who spoke wisdom with pure hearts. Do you remember that oath, War Commander?" The arena was so quiet that Kevin could hear his own heartbeat. Thexal stood frozen, his claws still extended, but no longer moving toward attack. The ancient laws of Zephyrian society were incredibly complex, full of oaths and promises that bound entire family lines for generations. Elder Vorthek stood up slowly from his seat, his ancient eyes wide with surprise. "The human speaks truth," he said in a voice that carried across the entire arena. "The oath of Morthal is recorded in the Crystal Archives. No warrior of the Crimson Ridge clan may strike down one who demonstrates pure wisdom." Kevin felt a wave of relief, but he wasn't finished yet. He had studied Zephyrian culture long enough to know that stopping here would only delay the fight, not end it. Thexal could argue that Kevin hadn't truly demonstrated wisdom, just memorized some old texts. "But I offer more than ancient words," Kevin said, switching to a newer form of Zephyrian that everyone in the arena could understand perfectly. "I offer proof that humans deserve to stand as equals among the star-traveling peoples." Kevin began to speak about human history, but not in English or any Earth language. He told the story of humanity's rise from primitive beginnings to space travel entirely in Zephyrian, using concepts and metaphors that would make sense to alien minds. He spoke of human persistence in the face of impossible odds. He told them about explorers who crossed deadly oceans, scientists who cured terrible diseases, and ordinary people who sacrificed everything to help others. But he told these stories using Zephyrian ideas of honor and courage. As Kevin spoke, something amazing happened. Other aliens in the arena began to nod in understanding and approval. The concepts he was describing were universal, but the way he was expressing them showed a deep understanding of how different species thought about bravery and wisdom. "Your people value strength in battle," Kevin said, looking directly at Thexile. "But humans have shown strength in ways your ancestors would recognize. We fight not just enemies, but ignorance, disease, and despair. We explore not just new worlds, but new ideas. We build not just weapons, but homes for our children and schools for our young." Kevin's metal rod had never struck a single blow, but his words were hitting Thexile harder than any physical weapon could. The war commander's crystalline skin was shifting through colors that Kevin recognized as signs of deep emotional conflict. "I challenged your honor not because humans hate Zephyrians," Kevin continued, "but because honor demands truth. You came here with lies and deception, planning to make slaves of beings who could have been your allies. That is not the behavior of warriors. That is the behavior of cowards." The insult hung in the air like a challenge, but it was wrapped in so much cultural understanding and respect for Zephyrian traditions that Thexile couldn't simply dismiss it. Kevin had used the alien's own values against him. War Commander Thexile slowly retracted his claws. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that the arena's amplification system had to boost it for everyone to hear. "You speak wisdom, human," Thexile said, "and you speak it in our own tongue better than many of our young warriors. You know our history, our laws, our sacred oaths. You have defeated me without striking a blow." The war commander knelt in the sand, a gesture of respect that sent shock waves through the Zephyrian spectators. "I yield the trial of honor to one who has shown greater honor than my own." Kevin collapsed to his knees, the metal rod falling from his shaking hands. He had done it. Somehow, impossibly, he had faced down the most dangerous warrior in the Zephyrian Empire and won through nothing but words and cultural knowledge. But the surprises weren't over yet. Elder Vorthik stood and raised his arms for silence. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries and the authority of ancient law. "The trials are complete, and the humans have proven themselves worthy of respect," he declared. "But more than that, they have shown understanding of our ways that goes beyond mere study. The one called Kevin Hayes has demonstrated wisdom that would be honored in our greatest schools." The old Zephyrian looked directly at Kevin. "By the ancient laws, I name you Keth Mirthal, Speaker of Wisdom Between Worlds. You are the first alien ever to receive this title. Your words will carry weight in all Zephyrian space." Kevin tried to stand but found his legs wouldn't support him. Commander Rodriguez and several other humans rushed into the circle to help him up. As they lifted him, Kevin could hear something he never expected to hear. The Zephyrian warriors were cheering not just polite applause, but the same kind of battle cry they gave to their greatest heroes. They were honoring the small human professor, who had come to their station just to translate languages, and had ended up teaching them something about honor and wisdom. War Commander Thexile approached Kevin, moving slowly to show he meant no threat. When he spoke, his voice held genuine respect. "Human Kevin Hayes," Thexile said, "you came here to translate words between our peoples, but you have translated something far more important. You have shown us that strength comes in many forms, and that true warriors fight with wisdom as well as weapons." As Kevin was carried from the arena by his cheering human comrades, his simple translator's clothes soaked with sweat and covered in sand that looked like blood under the red-tinted lights, he realized something profound had happened. He had come to this station as a quiet professor whose job was to help two species understand each other's words. He was leaving as the first human to earn the highest honor the Zephyrian Empire could give. The speaker of wisdom who had proven that humanity deserved to stand as equals among the stars. The war that had seemed inevitable was over before it could truly begin, ended not by weapons or treaties, but by one man's deep understanding of what it meant to communicate across the vast differences between species the galaxy would never be the same.